So are you one of those golfers who gets driver in play, which everyone tells you is the hardest club in the bag, but from the middle of the fairway, good lie, you just constantly make a mess of those iron shots by fatting it, thinning it, or maybe even topping the ball? Well, if you're like over 90% of golfers, you really struggle getting that angle of attack correct to strike your irons purely, compress the ball, and get great distance and accuracy. Well, the good news is, I'm going to show you in today's video a really simple way, first of all, of understanding it, but then executing that perfect delivery with your irons every time. So most golfers, when they're topping and thinning the ball, they get told they need to hit down more on the golf ball. And I think for a lot of golfers, it gets confusing about, right, with some clubs I need to hit down, certain clubs I need to hit up. What exactly do we mean by that? So the angle of attack that the club has is the way it's moving as it's coming into the golf ball. And it can only do one of three things. It can be traveling down, hopefully to collect the ball and then ground. It can be traveling dead level with the ground, or it could be traveling up when it hits the ball. Now, ultimately, when the ball's on the floor, we don't want the club traveling up, because if we miss the ground back here, we're going to hit halfway at the ball or top the ball. So I think most golfers will agree that a well-struck iron shot, we would hit ball and then ground. So the club does need to be traveling in a downward motion. Now, the big challenge for most golfers is they actually don't touch the ground at all. So they don't take divots, and it's usually because when they've taken a divot, it's been behind the golf ball, and nobody likes that. That first shot I hit there, hit way behind, and it went nowhere. But what we need to practice initially is making sure we touch the ground. And I would say, to begin with, if you're someone who doesn't touch the ground, don't worry even where you touch it. Just used to get in the bottom of the swing low enough that you're making contact with the ground and that the divot would be deep enough that the club's getting in the ground. So once you touch the ground, what you've got to think about is your golf swing is basically the club moving in a circle around your body. So on the way back, the club's moving up, then it moves down, reaches its lowest point, and then continues back up around the circle. So as long as the low point of the golf swing is in the ground and ahead of the golf ball, we're going to get that ball and then ground contact. So if you're somebody that says, right, I want to touch the ground, you might initially swing and say, okay, that felt reasonable, but we can see there the low point was half an inch ahead, the club's travelled down 0.6 degrees and the ball's carried 142 yards. So that is what we would talk about. The club's been very shallow into impact. Now, with a 7-iron, 8-9 and pitching wedge, we'd like the club to be moving down more. So the way we would create that is keep the ball position the same, but we want the low point to be further ahead. So maybe 3-4 inches ahead. So that's what I would then work on. I'm trying to touch the ground further ahead. And for a lot of golfers, it's a case of making sure they move early enough into that lead side. For some golfers, it's just a case of focusing on trying to touch that. Remember, we're usually quite good if given a task at achieving the task. The key is you just need to work on something that benefits your golf swing. Whereas in my opinion, a lot of golfers are working on stuff that actually doesn't change the delivery of their golf club. It just makes the swing look nicer. So if I said on this next one, I'm going to try and touch maybe 4 inches ahead of the golf ball and make sure I make contact with the mat at that point. So straight away, felt a more solid strike. We can see my low point was 2.8 inches ahead. So the club's then travelled down 3 degrees and suddenly we pick up yardage at 156 yards. So remember, those short clubs with loft on them are the ones where we want the club travelling down the most, therefore they want that low point ahead. Now, but probably what many of you will do is if you're somebody who maybe catches a little bit behind and you have the ball nicely in the middle, a lot of golfers then move that ball back in their stance, thinking and I understand this, that hang on, if I've hit the ground here, well, if I just put the ball there, that'd be great. But because a lot of golfers then try and get the ball in the air, it just makes it worse and worse. So I'm a big believer that learn to control where your low point is, but also the depth of the low point. So if you're somebody who hits the ground here, your low point could still be ahead, but the swing's so low that the ground's just getting in the way. So the height of the swing is important. So as long as you're just touching the ground, and if you're on the course, be a shallow divot, but make sure that low point's ahead. So again, I'm going to try that one at 2.8 inches. For me, that's kind of the minimum of where I want to be. And this is something I've always struggled with. So I'm going to try and move earlier into that lead side. Pushed it out to the right. Again, low point okay at 2.8 inches, but not enough. Now, let's say you are somebody that struggles getting far enough ahead. It might be for you that on the way back, you allow that weight to shift onto that right side like you've been told. But all of a sudden, you've got a lot further to get back to get that low point ahead. So you might be a golfer who, instead of thinking of weight shift, the pressure, as you move your arms and club that way, the pressure moves into that right side. Feel a bit more centered, and then it feels easier to get that low point ahead. So I'm going to feel more centered. Felt very crisp. We can see low point 5.3 inches ahead. Clubs travel down 6.4 degrees, and definitely a flatter trajectory, even though that carried at 156. So again, it's a little bit different for everyone. There's no one size fits all with the golf swing. But remember, the golf ball only understands what the club's doing. So kind of, do you make contact with ball first, where the club face is pointing, and the path dictates the shape. So get good and practice delivering the club better. But if you are somebody who struggles with ball striking, got to learn to control height of swing and low point. So definitely for me there, it feels easier if I feel more centered to get that low point further ahead. That probably felt the best one so far. So just under 86 mile an hour club speed, 118 ball speed, low point 4.6 inches ahead, 5.4 degrees down, and yes, at 179 carry, that's definitely getting out there a little bit further than I would normally do. Now, I know what you're thinking. I've said about this being irons. So 7 iron down to your wedges, very central. As the irons get longer, the ball just moves slightly further forward. So as long as you're getting that low point in a similar place, you could then see, with a 4 iron, for example, the low point won't be as far forward, therefore the club will still be moving down, but will be moving shallower. And this is a really important thing. So many golfers can do it okay with 7 iron down, but as they get into the longer clubs, because they've been told about sweeping things and picking the ball, always have to have that low point ahead. And even though I'm not doing it in this video, hybrids and fairway woods, you still need that low point ahead. As there's less loft on the club, slightly less ahead. But that will help you stand up there, make good swings, and just strike some really high quality iron shots.